dollar dominates global trade. In 2019, some 88% of international transactions involved US dollars. No other currencies came close. That gives the US extraordinary power over nearly anyone who imports or exports anything anywhere. Commodities like oil, gold, and coffee are all priced in dollars, regardless of where they come from. But this clout has long frustrated America's rivals, making them vulnerable to US trade sanctions. Here's how the global economy runs on the US dollar, and why some countries are developing alternative systems that could chip away at the dollar's dominance.
The dollar came to dominate trade after World War II. The US was the biggest economy in the world. Other countries were trying to rebuild, and the dollar, it was stable and plentiful.
In 1944, a conference of 44 nations agreed to peg their currencies to the US dollar, while the dollar itself was pegged to gold. As global trade grew, so did the use of the dollar to conduct the world's business. Even after the United States abandoned the gold standard in 1971, the dollar remained the world's currency of choice.
The world has gotten used to doing business in dollars because it's just easier than doing business in any other currency. The dollar is incredibly liquid, meaning it's easy to buy and sell things all over the world. The US banking system is very efficient, and those things combine to make it cheaper for businesses to buy and sell in dollars.
Here's how a typical international transaction works in US dollars. A Canadian lumber company sells boards to a French home builder. The buyer's bank in France and the seller's bank in Canada settle the payment in dollars via correspondent banks in the United States. These correspondent banks have accounts at the United States Federal Reserve. The money is transferred seamlessly between these banks' Fed accounts because their status as correspondent banks means they are seen as safe counterparties. The United States says the use of these correspondent banks means every transaction technically touches US soil, giving it legal jurisdiction and compelling foreign countries to abide by its laws on money laundering and corruption.
After 9/11, the US used the power of the dollar to advance its foreign policy goals. The idea was to cut out the sources of funding for terror organizations.
The US used its control of the dollar to increase surveillance of global money flows and curb financing toward bad actors. It did this by imposing sanctions on its rivals. Under the system, if a business or country tries to trade with a sanctioned entity in dollars, the US has the power to cut off its access to US currency. But other countries have been building workarounds. Some EU countries opposed the US sanctions against Iran. These sanctions, put in place after the US withdrew from the Iranian nuclear deal in 2018, included banning dollar transactions with Iranian banks. As a result, the EU is developing a euro-backed system that is designed to facilitate trade between Europe and Iran without sending money across borders.
The EU countries still in the Iran deal are trying to figure out a way to work around the US system so they can trade with Iran. Now that bothers the US, which is trying to exert maximum pressure on the Iranian economy.
India already has an alternative payment system in place that it's using to do business with Iran. According to a Wall Street Journal investigation, it's been used to facilitate transactions with sanctioned Iranian entities. But the United States is still exerting its influence in the Middle East through the power of the US dollar.
The dollar still dominates global trade. You can see that in the standoff between the US and Iraq. Iraq says they want to throw US troops out of the country. The US said, we'll cut you off from your dollars in the US system. But in the future, it's not clear how strong that threat will remain as other countries chip away at the power of the dollar.
If the power of the dollar falls, it could hurt the United States' ability to control the global trading system.